Welcome back. In a moment, we'll look at the African women who are dominating politics on the continent. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. The metro has reopened in the Russian city of St. Petersburg following Monday's explosion, which claimed the lives of at least 14 people. Kyrgyzstan security services said the attack was staged by a suicide bomber named Akbar Zhondajalyov, a naturalized Russian citizen. The ousted South Korean President Park Geun-hye has been questioned by prosecutors at the detention center where she's being held after her arrest. She's accused of allowing a close friend to extort money from businesses in exchange for political favors. There have been clashes overnight between police and supporters of Ecuador's opposition leader, Guillermo Lasso. An early vote count appears to show the incumbent president, Lenin Moreno, will maintain office after a tight election. Lasso has called for a recount. He says there's been electoral fraud. African women are increasingly playing leading roles in shaping the continent's political path, with many serving as head of state. Insight's Juliana Olayinka explains.
Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Malawi's Joyce Banda, Amina Mohammed in the United Nations. Just a few of the many African women who have defied stereotypes and achieved what was once unimaginable. The continent's well-known issues with endless poverty and brutal conflicts are just two of the many problems that the African woman is confronted with. Educating young girls remains a large-scale agenda. Child marriage and early pregnancies are also widespread. However, with Rwanda, Senegal and South Africa currently featuring among the world's top 10 parliaments with the most female representation, the African woman is defying the odds. Let's take a look at the profiles of some of Africa's best female political representatives. Nobel laureate Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is the first democratically elected female president on the continent. Last year, she was listed as the 83rd most powerful woman in the world by Forbes. As president of Liberia for over 12 years, she has been at the forefront of promoting peace and social and economic development. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She served 2 terms as the finance minister of one of Africa's largest economies, Nigeria. Okonjo-Iweala started her career at the World Bank, where for many years she served as the corporate secretary and the vice president. Joyce Banda is the first female president of Malawi. Last year, Forbes named her Africa's most influential woman. Banda is among the few African presidents who supports gay rights and was quick to repeal all laws against same-sex marriages immediately she got into power. Gambia's Fatou Bensouda. She's the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor. She was once Gambia's Minister of Justice and served as a legal advisor to ousted President Yahya Jammeh. Time magazine once listed Bensouda among the 100 most influential people in the world. And Catherine Samba-Panza. She was chosen as the interim president of the Central African Republic in January 2014. She had a mandate to lead the country out of months of sectarian killings. Samba-Panza has been very active in civil society and has worked on various female issues, such as the fight against female genital mutilation.
Well, let's discuss this further, shall we? I'm joined in the studio now by the presenter and political commentator Priscilla Wipo, and also with us still is Ibrahim Nye. Priscilla, what do you think the difference is between the circumstances where some women make it all the way to the top and serve their country as a head of state or some similar office, and other countries, there's no women in sight?
It's very interesting. I think it's fair to say, you know, the old saying that says it's a man's world. That's a reality across the globe, because it's interesting to note that, you know, women right across the world, as you've rightly said, are struggling to be part of the decision makers, to be at the head and at the helm of affairs, as it were. And it's also very interesting to note that in developed countries, for instance, here in the UK and the US, or, you know, in Japan, for instance, you would have expected to have seen more women at the head of affairs. But it's only in our recent history that we are seeing women, you know, attaining these positions. As we see more of it in Africa, I would say, than we do in the developed world. And of course, we've seen it in India and Pakistan before now. So I think that, it's that age-old thing where men have led, men have dominated, men has, forced through, and women have naturally been seen as the homemaker, as, looking after the children.
And that, I suppose, is a phenomenon in any walk of life, but maybe particularly in politics, I don't know. Rwanda is exceptional about this, isn't it? 63.8% of its parliamentarians or legislators are women. Why is it so remarkably high figure in Rwanda?
Well, number one, Rwanda has a deliberate policy of women empowerment.
Right.
And so, in spite of the traditional structures that may militate against the women in politics, the deliberate policy of the Rwandan government to have women in parliament and politics has led to about 63%, like you've called the statistics. And other countries are emulating Rwanda's example. In Kenya, there's a deliberate provision in the constitution that allocates seats to women from the various constituencies and the counties from the 2010 constitution. Liberia, we're still struggling with this fact. I mean, it is a debate that is now in the political cycle, and we might reach there to have a constitutional reform, probably to have seats allocated to women. But what I can tell you is that the glass ceiling in Africa has broken. I mean, not completely.
You feel it has really broken?
I mean, it has, let me not say broken, it has cracked.
Okay.
And
yeah,
in Liberia,
maybe not broken completely.
In Liberia, I think it has already cracked.
Yeah.
And in the next 2-3 elections, you will see that women leadership in Liberia will be, I mean, even if not at the level of the presidency, but you will find women in key positions of decision making. And at the moment now is quite encouraging.
Yeah.
We have about 11% of women in our parliament, and okay, it's a fall from 2005 when we had 14%, but at the level of the executive, even the private sector, women are making some inroads.
But Priscilla, what are the common traits of the women that make it? Is it the fact that they maybe have middle-class backgrounds, so they have finance behind them, they have educational opportunities, maybe, as we alluded to with President Sirleaf, some external influence, like a Harvard course and things like that. Is that what's needed at the moment, or can Africa actually grow its own leaders right from within?
I think Africa can grow its own leaders right from within. I think what we need across the board is education.
Yeah.
Understanding, men being able to understand that a woman is just as equally capable does help. In the Rwandan situation, for instance, it's a fine example. And as my colleague rightly said, it's now part of their policy. And that happened. The Rwanda situation came about by default. It was after the war that there were more women that were available and ready to take up these positions, and so we had a lot more women. And having a lot more women, having seen what they are capable of, Rwanda has understood better than most that it is important to have women and the impact and effect of having women within. And so therefore other countries are emulating, but I think it starts with educating the masses to understand that women are equally good, perhaps at times better decision makers in situations, equally as men. Yes, we don't have the same kind of strength as men, physical strength, but I think that having the know-how, the knowledge, does certainly encourage for us all to work together.
It's also often said, Priscilla, that women don't perhaps, politics tends to be quite adversarial, don't they? You have to diss your opponents, you have to big yourself up. And without wanting to sort of stereotype, that's something maybe doesn't come naturally to many women.
I'm not so sure that I would say it doesn't come naturally to many women. I think it does, but maybe some of them may find it a bit more difficult. They may be challenged at first, but I think once they understand the game, they'll probably play just as well as the men do. Women need that push, they need that encouragement. It certainly helps to have the education, like you mentioned earlier, but I think they also need the support of the men as well to be able to come forward more. And I think that, the stakes are, that with the men, especially what we see on the African continent, the men, they literally fight with everything. The stakes are quite high. So I think if that was revisited and perhaps looked at and understood that this is not a personal fight per se, but it is more about the issue. It's a fight of
ideas, isn't it?
Yes.
And concepts and things. And as Africans look out around the rest of the world and they see increasing numbers, I mean, here in the UK, we've got a female Prime Minister once again for the second time. Germany's had a female leader for many years and so on. Does that help trickle down? Does that at least sort of open the discussion that this can be done?
Oh, sure, sure. African women also, I can say, it's a two-way learning process. African women are learning from women across the world, and women in Europe are also learning from African women.
Yeah.
I hear some Western European politicians saying President Salif is their role model.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way. And again, on the other hand, in countries that have women leadership in Europe that are giving aid to African countries, they are also emphasizing the issue of gender. They are supporting women development programs. But I want to pick up on the argument of education. The core issue of political leadership is first about empowerment. And I've raised this issue in Liberia before. I've told the Liberian women, you don't have to argue first for political participation. Let your argument be opportunities for education, opportunities for small businesses, and good health care for the women. And once you attain that level where you have maybe around 50% of women with good education, secondary or university education, you're going to see by default how women are going to challenge men in the various local constituencies for the House of, for the Senate, the House of Rep, and even the presidency. Now we have, out of 20 candidates, we have one woman who wants to contest for president. For the last three elections, we had women contesting every presidential election.
Well, we'll have to see how that pans out, not only in Liberia, but also around Africa as well. Ibrahim and Priscilla, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We end our programme with the Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know. The world's most expensive diamond, expected to fetch over $16 million when it goes up for auction in Hong Kong. The 59.6 carat, known as the Pink Star, was sold 3 years ago for much more than that, but the buyer pulled out of the deal at the very last minute. Now, after some more successful auctions of coloured diamonds in recent years, the auction house Sotheby's says it's a good moment to try to sell it again. The mixed cut jewel was initially mined by De Beers in 1999 in Botswana as a 132.5 carat rough diamond before being cut and polished. Its refined form is now set to be the most valuable polished gem ever offered at auction. Well worth it? They do say diamonds last forever. That's all from me for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.